Any hole will do. Any hole will do. Port in a storm. You don't look at the mantelpiece when you're poking the fire. But is this the case? Is it the case, when it comes to narcissists, that with regard to the choice of sexual partner, is it really the case that any hole will do? To answer this question, we must examine the school and the cadre of the narcissist. For those of you who are familiar with my work, you ought to know what the school and the cadres are. For those of you unfamiliar, I shall explain. There are 4 cadres: victim, somatic, elite, and cerebral. If you want to understand more about those, you can access that in my book, Sitting Target, and also the HG Malls series. I also divide narcissists up into various schools. The lessers, lower lesser, middle lesser, upper lesser A, upper lesser B. The mid-rangers, lower mid-range, middle mid-range A, middle mid-range B, and upper mid-range. The graters, lower greater, middle greater, upper greater, and the ultra. 4 schools, 3 of which are subdivided. These schools and cadres are instrumental in answering the question of, will any hole will do? So, when it comes to the narcissist taking a trip to Pound Town, what are those preferences? Well, let's deal first of all with the situation concerning the cadres. Where you're dealing with a victim narcissist, it really is a case of any hole will do when it comes to the horizontal hula. The victim narcissist often feigns incompetence when it comes to matters of a sexual nature. They may well be impotent where male, frigid where female. They may not be particularly good at sliming the banana. They want to be taught. They want to be mollycoddled. They may have particular fetishes which accord with infantilization. And therefore, their choice of sexual partner isn't so much about quality, but very much, when it comes to bumping uglies, they'll take what they're given, so long as that individual accords with the ability to paternalize them, to look after them, to guide them, to cater for their various failings, and to do so in a supportive and sympathetic way. They're not particularly bothered about the way that their sexual partner looks when it comes to the 4-legged foxtrot. They are not particularly bothered about how pneumatic that individual is when it comes to the issue of knocking boots. They're not interested particularly about how fat or thin the individual is when they're engaging in checking the oil. So consequently, when you're dealing with the victim cadre, any hole will do so long as it accords with those needs that I've just described in terms of being paternalized, being looked after, being supported, being treated in a sympathetic way. Those are the key criteria. If the aforementioned hole doesn't cater to those things, the victim narcissist won't be interested. Or certainly less so. What then about the boffins or the pseudo-boffins? Our horn-rimmed, spectacle-wearing chums, the cerebrals. What's it like for them when it comes to feeding Kitty and doing the no-pants dance? Well, in that instance, cerebrals aren't motivated by looks particularly, and they're not interested in physical appearance when it comes to burying the bone. For them, of course, they will engage in sexual congress. However, that's done almost more out of a sense of duty, and they would much rather assert control and gather fuel in a non-sexual way through demonstrating their supposed or actual intellectual superiority, their selection of Judge Dredd comics, recalling all of the detail about that, talking about music, playing instruments, etc. And therefore, the physical appearance, the sexual appetite, the sexual mores the good looks of an individual when it comes to riding the flagpole are not of considerable consequence. Yes, they could be a bonus, but they are not the prime drivers when it comes to the assessment for the cerebral narcissist with regard to doing two-person push-ups. The cerebral narcissist, of course, is sexual in the sense of using sex like any narcissist does for the purposes of achieving the prime aims, but is done in a more remote way. The use of porn, sexting, dirty telephone calls, particularly sexting and dirty telephone calls, will cause the cerebral narcissist to demonstrate often quite significant accomplishment because they're utilizing words. And cerebral narcissists are invariably wordsmiths, either ones that are capable of the creation of words or bastardizing and utilizing other people's words where they're a lower echelon cerebral narcissist. And therefore, they will engage in sexting. And therefore, to get what they require, the control and fuel through sexting, it doesn't matter what the sextee looks like. When it comes to a dirty telephone call, it's the noise, the words, the fuel that's being provided. It doesn't matter what that person looks like. Similarly, if they were to engage in mutual masturbation over video, it's more about what's being said and the reaction rather than the way that the person looks. And therefore, they're not going to be particularly selective in terms of sexual partner when it comes down to the issue of looks. And so long as the whole is one which accords with the provision of a response to what pushes the buttons of a cerebral narcissist, then it very much is the case of any whole will do. What then about the somatic and elite narcissist when it comes to burping the worm in the mole hole, filling the cream donut and testing the humidity? Well, in those circumstances, this is where there is greater potential for discernment when it comes to stuffing the taco. Somatic narcissists are invariably hypersexualized. Not necessarily always. It might be the case that they engage in frequent sex. And in some instances, you might get a somatic narcissist that is all about the appearance, all about money, the way that their house looks, the places that they go to, the amount of money that they have. And therefore, they score highly across all of those somatic traits and aren't that bothered about sex, but they're still a somatic narcissist. But usually where you find a somatic, you're going to find somebody that wants to sweep the chimney, thread the needle, take old one eye to the optometrist, and so forth. In those circumstances, a somatic is going to be more discerning. As a general rule, the upper echelon narcissist will be guided by wanting somebody that is physically attractive, similarly very interested in sex, keeps in shape, is a hard body, wears nice clothing, smells good, takes good care of themselves. Because the high level of self-esteem of those upper echelon narcissists means that not only do they want someone that is comparable to themselves in terms of looks, etc., but also, of course, where they're choosing an empathic victim, they will choose someone of a similar nature to themselves, so they mirror back a similar level of attractiveness to that victim also, as part of the mirroring that we engage in. And therefore, when it comes to spearing the bearded clam, in those circumstances, the somatic narcissist that is, for instance, a greater upper mid-range, maybe also middle mid-range, is more likely to choose somebody that is physically attractive, well-dressed, hygienic, clean, well-scrubbed, etc., because it accords with their own notion of grandiosity, and also they are more able to attract those individuals because invariably they are good-looking themselves, or they have other access to other motivators, commonly money and power being particular motivators that enable a somatic narcissist to get his or her way. Therefore, somatics will be discerning. But in the event of a fuel crisis, when it comes to getting some stanky on the hank down, or hitting a home run, or pounding the Punani pavement, even those types of narcissists may be forced to downgrade, as I have explained with regard to the issue of does the narcissist downgrade in a separate video. What about then the lower echelon somatic narcissists? What do they do when they need to smack the salmon or test the suspension? Well, in those instances, they will, because of delusion, aim high, and they will want somebody who is particularly attractive so they can make the beast with two backs. They will want somebody that's a hard body, who is a ride-the-belonger pony. However, given the fact that often, but not always, the somatic narcissist might be deluded in terms of he was once good-looking and now has a great big beer belly and receding hair and rotten teeth, his ability, of course, to pull somebody that is good-looking diminishes. Again, there may be other motivating factors such as wealth and power, often seen with upper lesser type A and upper lesser type B, enabling them as lower echelon narcissists to achieve attractive partners, so that when they attack the pink fortress, they succeed. However, they may also select, because they don't have much of a choice, empathic victims who are less good looking, possibly downright ugly. And when it comes to exchanging bodily fluids and playing hide the cannoli, they aren't discerning at all, and they will proverbially shag the barber's floor. For those lower echelon narcissists, whilst they may prefer to have the prime bit of steak, they're quite happy to take the offcuts, and therefore it is a case for them of any hole will do. When we get down to lower lesser and middle lesser, and sometimes with the lower mid-ranger, well, when they're doing the buttering of the biscuit and shaking the trailer, there is no discernment whatsoever. Again, of course, because of delusion, they would like to aim high, but ultimately they're not fussy, and they'll make whoopee with whoever comes along. They'll engage in the hanky-panky and open the gates of Mordor with whichever individual is accommodative, would accommodate them. Somebody who looks like a meth head, somebody who's hideously overweight, somebody who only has one eye, somebody who has poor physical hygiene, they'll take it. They will get mounted, they'll go home to play with the box the kid came in, and clean the carpet quite readily with that individual, because utilising sex with that person enables them to achieve control and, of course, gain fuel. What then about the elites? What do they do when it comes along to knowing somebody in the biblical sense and engaging in a bit of lust and thrust? Well, elites are similar to the somatic. Although they are not quite the shagadelic individuals that the somatic is, because they're the most hypersexualized, the elites are not far behind. And similarly to the somatic, your upper echelon elites of the graters, the mid-rangers, the middle mid-rangers, possibly, certainly the upper mid-rangers, when they want to do the mattress dance, do a bit of humping and mingle limbs, they will aim for people that are good-looking and also, of course, intelligent. They will look for somebody that's physically attractive, because they will want that amalgam of the appropriate somatic and cerebral traits. When they part the pink sea and do the bed boogie, then what matters to them is somebody that is of similar looks or better looking, again, grandiosity, sense of entitlement. And, again, in a fuel crisis, when it's necessary to spelunk the Batcave and provide a hot beef injection, in those circumstances, they could engage in the downgrading, but they're unlikely to. Greater energy levels, greater level of intelligence, greater access to motivating factors, such as being good-looking themselves, power, money, etc., means that when it comes to bury the weasel and doing the deed and stir at the upskirt yogurt, then the upper echelon elites are going to be far more effective in that way. Lower echelon elites, similar situation to the somatic. When they want to have relations or take a roll in the hay, they will aim high, and you can have, for instance, a middle lesser elite, because they can be a mix of somatic and cerebral. They might not be particularly attractive, but they think they are, and they may not be hugely intelligent, but they give the appearance of doing so by pseudo behaviours. Those individuals will take whatever comes their way. And when it comes to doing the nasty and playing doctor, they will adopt the any hole will do approach. That accords with the concept of, when it comes to vulcanizing the whoopee stick, of looking at the relevant attractiveness in terms of physical looks, being a hard body, being chiseled, ripped and buff, being well dressed, made up, presentable, all of those things. When it comes, of course, to any hole will do in the sense of gender preference, well, that is covered in a separate video of Is the Narcissist Secretly Gay? This video was all about doing the Foxtrot uniform Charlie Kilo when it comes to having the idea of just picking absolutely anybody to score with. If you want to understand more about gender preferences, etc., go to Is the Narcissist Secretly Gay? Here, when it comes to asking, will any hole will do, you have to look at cadre, and then thereafter, when it comes to somatic and delete, what's the school? And therein lies the answer. After all of that, I dare say, you may well want to engage in a period of celibacy. But watch out, the narcissist is coming. Often, literally. I'm HG Tudor. Thank you for listening.